This is my real story. My name is Lena Carver. I'm 23 years old, and what happened to me 3 years ago still follows me in every dark hallway. Every sudden silence, and every time I dare to close my eyes for too long. I grew up in a small town in Oregon, the kind of place where everyone waves but still whispers behind your back, and where secrets are kept longer than the memories of the people who hold them. I had no reason to think my life would turn into a nightmare, but in the winter of 2022, everything changed. That was when the shadows started following me. At first, I thought it was paranoia. I told myself it was the cold wind rattling the old windows in my apartment, the creak of the wooden floorboards that had been there since the 50s, or maybe just my own tired mind playing tricks on me after long shifts at work. But then I started noticing things, small things going missing. A mug, my hairbrush, my favorite sweater, harmless on their own, but what made my blood run cold was when I found them again, placed neatly on the stairs outside my bedroom, stairs that led nowhere but to my locked front door. One night I woke up to the sound of whispering. It was faint, almost as if it was coming from inside the walls. I sat up, straining to hear my heart beating so hard it made my vision pulse. I told myself I was dreaming, that I just needed to drink some water, but then my bedroom door slowly opened. I froze. The hinges didn't even squeak. It was as if someone had been careful not to make a sound. There was no one there, only the hallway stretching into darkness, but I swear I saw something move at the end of it, a shape too tall to be human, yet too thin to be anything else. My breathing grew sharp, my chest tight, and I whispered to myself over and over, "You're awake. You're awake. You're awake." I slammed the door shut and pushed my dresser against it. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I called my best friend Erin and told her everything. She laughed nervously and said I'd been watching too many late-night horror documentaries, but Erin didn't know that when I left for work that day, the shadow followed me. I saw it in the reflection of the bus window, trailing behind the sidewalk. Crowds, sometimes falling back, sometimes so close I could almost feel cold fingers on the back of my neck. By the time I got home that evening, I decided I wasn't crazy. I was being watched. That night, it escalated. I was lying in bed when I heard the faint sound of humming, not from the street, not from my neighbors. It was inside my apartment. I followed the sound to my kitchen, and there on the counter was the mug that had gone missing days before, filled with water and something floating in it. I leaned closer and saw strands of hair, my hair tangled like a dark knot inside. The humming stopped. My skin went cold, and before I could move, the kitchen light flickered and died, leaving me in total darkness. Something brushed past me, and I heard the faintest whisper right by my ear. "You took her place." I ran. I didn't even think. I grabbed my phone and bolted out the front door, barefoot, into the freezing street. I stayed at Erin's that night, curled up on her couch, clutching my phone like it was a weapon. The next day I called my landlord and demanded the history of my apartment. At first he brushed me off, but when I mentioned police involvement, his tone changed. He told me that 2 years before I moved in, a young woman had lived there, a quiet, reclusive artist named Claire, who vanished without a trace. One night, the only thing they found was her sketchbook left open on her bed with the words, "She's here," scrawled over every page. My stomach turned, but I didn't leave. I told myself I could handle it, that whatever it was, it couldn't hurt me if I didn't believe in it. I was wrong. Over the next week, I woke every night at exactly 3:17 a.m. to find something different in my apartment, an open window in the dead of winter, muddy footprints leading from the bathroom to my bedroom, the faint smell of rotting flowers in the air. On the 7th night, I found a note on my pillow. It wasn't written in my handwriting. It simply said, "Stop pretending you don't see me." That's when I realized this wasn't just haunting, it was a warning. And if I didn't figure out what Claire had seen before she disappeared, I knew I'd be next. This is only the beginning. Subscribe, like, and share if you want to hear the rest. And remember, this story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries. That night, after finding the note on my pillow, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in the apartment again, so I stayed at Erin's for 3 days, hoping that whatever had attached itself to me would lose interest if I wasn't there. But on the 3rd night, something strange happened. Erin's cat, a fluffy black Persian named Salem, wouldn't go near me. He hissed and swatted the air as if something invisible stood between us. Erin laughed it off, but I saw the look in her eyes. She was starting to believe me. We decided to go back to my place together during the day, thinking daylight would make things less terrifying. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt heavy, like breathing through wet cloth, and the faint smell of rotting flowers returned. Erin walked into my bedroom first, and I heard her sharp inhale. There on my bed was Claire's sketchbook. I'd never seen it before. The cover was worn, the pages curling at the edges, and when we opened it, every single page was covered in frantic Charcoal drawings of the same tall, thin shadow with a head that tilted unnaturally to one side. The last page had no drawing, just a single sentence, scrawled over and over until the paper was nearly ripped through. She waits for the one who took her place. My stomach twisted as I realized the words from the whisper were exactly the same. Aaron suggested we burn the book, but something in me screamed not to. Instead, I put it in a box and shoved it into my closet, like hiding it could make it less real. That night, I had my first dream about Claire. In it, I was standing in my apartment, but everything was wrong. The walls were covered in black mold, the floorboards warped and wet, and the air reeked of decay. Claire stood at the end of the hallway, her hair covering her face, her clothes torn and her hands hanging limply at her sides. I tried to speak, but my voice wouldn't work. She raised her head slowly, and where her eyes should have been, there were just black voids. When she finally spoke, her voice was a guttural rasp that didn't belong to anything human. "You can't give it back." I woke up gasping the taste of blood in my mouth and realized my nose was bleeding. The next morning, Aaron begged me to go to the police, but what could I tell them? That a dead woman was haunting me because I took her apartment? I decided to do my own research instead. I went to the local library and dug through old newspaper archives until I found the article. Local artist disappears from Hawthorne Street apartment, it said. Claire had been last seen buying groceries and her landlord had reported her missing after she failed to pay rent for 2 weeks. There was no mention of suspects, only that police found disturbing drawings in her apartment and possible signs of forced entry. I kept digging until I found something that made my hand shake. 5 years before Claire moved in, another woman named Alice had vanished from the same apartment. Both women were in their 20s, lived alone, and were last seen in winter. The police had never connected the cases, but now I knew it wasn't coincidence. Aaron and I decided to spend one more night in the apartment together, determined to catch whatever was happening on camera. We set up 2 old camcorders, one in the hallway, one in the bedroom, before going to sleep. At exactly 3:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of the bedroom door opening. Aaron was still asleep beside me, but the air was freezing. I sat up slowly and saw the tall, thin shadow standing in the corner. Its head still tilted, its long fingers twitching like it was trying to remember how to move like a person. My body locked up, but the shadow took one step forward and the floor groaned under its weight. It stopped at the foot of the bed, tilting its head the other way as if curious. I wanted to scream, but then it did something I will never forget. It pointed at me, then at Aaron, then slowly traced a finger across its throat. My vision went black, and when I woke, it was morning. The camcorder in the hallway was smashed to pieces, but the one in the bedroom was intact. We played the footage and my stomach dropped. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the shadow appeared in the corner, just like I remembered, but as it stepped closer, the screen began to distort, static eating at the image. Then, right before the video cut out, we saw a pale hand, human this time, reach from behind me and place a folded piece of paper on the bed. When we unfolded it, it said, "One more." Erin refused to stay another night. She left that day, but I couldn't run, not yet. I had to know why it had chosen me. Why it waited, why it killed. I thought maybe if I understood I could stop it. But deep down I knew the truth. Claire hadn't vanished because she ran. She'd been taken, and now it was my turn. The day Erin left my apartment felt different, quieter, but not in a comforting way. It was the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums, where every tiny sound is amplified until you start questioning if you're even hearing anything at all. I barely ate, barely moved, and every time I walked past the closet where I'd hidden Claire's sketchbook, I felt this pull, like something behind the door was waiting for me to open it. That night I gave in. I pulled the box from the closet and opened the book again, flipping through the frantic charcoal sketches until I noticed something I hadn't before: tiny smudges of red in the corners of some pages, like fingerprints dipped in dried blood. One of the pages had been altered since I last saw it. The drawing of the tall, thin shadow now had something clutched in its hand, a strand of hair that was unmistakably mine. My scalp prickled and I slammed the book shut, but before I could shove it back into the box, I heard it, a faint knock, not at the door but from inside the walls. I pressed my ear against the plaster, and there it was again, 3 slow, deliberate knocks followed by the sound of breathing. My heart pounded as I stepped back, and then a voice so faint I almost thought I imagined it whispered, "Lena, I didn't sleep instead. I spent the entire night combing through online forums for anything about the apartment, the shadow, or Claire." That's when I stumbled onto a thread titled "The Hawthorne Street Thing." The posts went back over a decade, people sharing stories about a thing that stands in the corner and a girl who knocks on the walls. One post from 2010 chilled me the most. "If you hear it knock 3 times, don't answer. If you hear hers by morning, I told myself it was just an urban legend, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. By morning, exhaustion had me on edge, and I decided to leave the apartment for the day just to breathe different air. I walked to a nearby coffee shop, but halfway there I froze. The reflection in a store window showed me walking alone, except in the reflection. My shadow wasn't moving like me. It lagged behind, then turned its head toward me while my body faced forward. I stumbled back from the glass, spilling my coffee, and when I looked again, it was normal. I told myself I was losing my mind, but the feeling of being followed stayed with me all day. When I got home that night, the smell of rotting flowers was so strong it made my eyes water. The closet door was wide open, the box on the floor, and Claire's sketchbook lay open to a blank page, except for fresh words written in that same jagged hand. "She's coming through." My body went cold, and before I could react, the temperature in the room dropped sharply, my breath turning to fog. Then I heard it, the slow creak of the bedroom door opening. Even though I'd locked it, I turned, and there she was, Claire, or what was left of her. Her skin was gray, her hair hanging in wet strands, her black void eyes locked on mine. She didn't move at first, just stood there, dripping water onto the floor, the smell of rot filling the room. Then she lifted her hand, pointing past me to the wall behind my bed. I turned, and to my horror, the wallpaper was bubbling, warping outward like something was pressing from the other side. The bulge split open, revealing a dark, wet void, and from it the tall shadow stepped out, its head brushing the ceiling, its limbs too long for its body. I backed into the corner, but it didn't lunge. It crouched down, so its face was level with mine, though it had no face, only the outline of where one should be. Claire stood behind it, her head twitching, and she said in that guttural rasp, "It needs to finish what I couldn't." Before I could scream, the shadow reached out, brushing its cold, rough fingers along my cheek, and in that moment, I saw flashes. Claire painting alone in the apartment, a stranger watching her from the corner, her being dragged into the wall as she clawed at the floor. Then just as suddenly, it let go and stepped back into the wall, taking Claire with it. The wall sealed itself as if nothing had happened, leaving me alone in the freezing room. I collapsed onto the floor, shaking violently, and for the first time I truly believed I wasn't going to survive this. But I also knew something else now. There was a way into wherever Claire had been taken, and if I could find it, maybe I could end this, or maybe it would end me. For 2 days after the night Claire and the shadow vanished into the wall, I didn't leave my apartment, not out of fear, but because I couldn't stop thinking about that warped, bubbling wallpaper and the cold void behind it. I kept running my fingers along the seams, pressing my ear against the plaster, listening for the faintest sign of movement. The knocking didn't return, but the air in that spot was colder than anywhere else in the apartment. I knew I had to go in. I didn't have a plan, no weapons except a flashlight and the old camcorder that had survived the last encounter. I stayed awake until 3:17 a.m., sitting cross-legged on my bed, waiting. The temperature dropped right on time, my breath frosting in the air, and then the wallpaper began to ripple again. I forced myself to my feet as the bulge pushed outward, and when the split opened, I stepped forward before the shadow could emerge. I didn't think about what I was doing, I just climbed through the gap into the freezing darkness. The instant I was inside, it sealed behind me, cutting off all light from my apartment. My flashlight's beam was weak, swallowed almost entirely by the blackness, but I could see that I was in a narrow, endless hallway. The walls dripped with moisture, the floor squelched under my shoes, and a faint hum vibrated in the air. I walked for what felt like hours until I saw movement ahead, a tall, thin figure standing perfectly still. My chest tightened, but as I stepped closer, I realized it wasn't the shadow, it was Claire. Her face was clear, and now her eyes still black voids, but there was something almost human in the way she tilted her head at me. "You shouldn't have come," she rasped, her voice echoing in the narrow space. "You can't leave until it takes what it wants." I told her I wasn't leaving without her, but she laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "It doesn't want me anymore, it wants you." Before I could reply, the hum grew louder, and the walls seemed to pulse like they were alive. The shadow emerged from the darkness behind Claire, towering over her, its limbs stretching unnaturally. As it reached for me, I backed away, but the hallway twisted, the floor tilting beneath me until I was sliding toward it. My flashlight flickered out, plunging me into complete blackness. I felt its fingers close around my ankle, ice searing into my skin, and then I was yanked forward. I thought I was done for until I heard another sound, faint but clear. Aaron's voice shouting my name. The shadow froze, its grip loosening, and in that moment Claire lunged at it. She slammed into the creature with a strength I didn't think she had, both of them tumbling backward into the wall, which split open into a swirling void. I stumbled to my feet and ran toward the sound of Aaron's voice, the hallway stretching and bending like it was trying to keep me. I saw a faint square of light ahead and dove for it, feeling icy fingers graze my back. As I passed through, I landed hard on my bedroom floor, gasping, Aaron kneeling beside me with wide, terrified eyes. She'd broken in after hearing my voice now from earlier. One I didn't even remember leaving, where I apparently whispered, "If I'm not back, pull me out." The wall behind me was smooth again, no sign of a doorway, no sign of Claire. But when I looked down there, in my palm was a single charcoal sketch of me standing in that endless hallway with the shadow's hand on my shoulder. I never saw Claire again, but sometimes late at night I hear the faintest knock from inside the walls, and I know one day it will open again. Thanks for staying with me until the end. If you felt the chills, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, so more people can hear these real-life nightmares. This story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries.